I'm going to start off with the prologue. I'm going to read part of the prologue from my book. It's called "A Band Is Not an Identity." So Spitboy was a all-female hardcore punk band from the 1990s, and we toured extensively Europe and New Zealand, Australia, Japan, the United States a couple times, and that was mostly when I was in my 20s. And I am now in my late 40s-ish, I guess. And so that was a long time ago. I wrote this memoir because I started realizing how important it was to kind of capture what Spitboy did, and I also realized that people are interested. So it's nice to know when people are interested. So here, I'm going to read a little bit of this. A band is not an identity. When I heard the Go-Go's for the first time, I was already in a band, a school band. I played the flute. Flute was pretty, and it seemed like a good choice of an instrument for a girl. I decorated the case with unicorn stickers and carried it to school every day by the slender leather handle, glad that I hadn't decided to play trombone. When I heard the Go-Go's, that was it. I was going to be in a rock band, a female rock band. I had already spent hours and hours singing along to Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark, one of my favorite records in my mom's collection. I even choreographed a dance routine to the song Twisted to perform in a talent show with my friend Tara. My mom sewed silver bric-a-brac on black leotards so we'd have matching outfits. The song has a line about how the narrator's analyst tells her she's crazy, and she tells him that he's the one with the problem, that she's known since childhood that she was a genius. I had never heard anything like it, and I hadn't yet read The Yellow Wallpaper. I listened to Linda Ronstadt too. Nobody really knew back then that she was Mexican-American. I must have looked at the photos of her in the Simple Dreams album jacket hundreds of times, staring into her big brown eyes. But the Go-Go's made it look so good. They added power and numbers and a certain defiance. Women rocking out, doing this thing that men acted like you had to have a dick to do. An all-female band, a woman's space, that made sense to me. Having been raised by women, wild women, horse women, seamstresses, baby whisperers, culinary whizzes, and expert bakers who taught me the value of creativity in women's spaces. Then I heard The Clash. That was it. I was going to be in a punk band, an all-female punk band that stood for something, a band that would write songs like Twisted, songs that spoke out against the mismeasure of woman. That would be even better. I suppose I could say that I'm not sure what attracted me to punk rock, but that wouldn't be true. Punk rock, the loud, hard, angry, fast music attracts angry people, angsty teenagers, social misfits, kids whose parents are too strict, straight, Christian, kids whose parents abuse them, kids who witness any other kind of violence in the home, seemingly normal kids who don't feel so normal on the inside. Interestingly, punk rock attracts working class kids who grow up in poverty and kids from privileged families. I grew up on welfare, raised by a single mom in a tiny town in the California foothills. Not too far from the Bay Area, Tuolumne County attracted all kinds of hippies, psychedelic hippies, drug addict hippies, gardening, pastoral fantasy hippies, wannabe American Indian hippies, Save Mother Earth hippies, herbal healer hippies, Grateful Dead hippies, and of course, your run-of-the-mill dirty hippie. If not for being raised by a strong woman whose influences on me, negative and positive, were profound, I could have rebelled against subculture movements. But as a Mexican-American, a Xicana in a hick town, I was never allowed to forget that I didn't fit in, that I muddied their waters. I would show them. So I'm originally from East LA. My mom grew up in Boyle Heights, and but I didn't live in LA I only lived in LA until I was about 8 months old. And my mom moved to the Bay Area, and then we only lived there until I was 4, and then we moved to a very small town. There were only 700 people there when I grew up. And it was totally a hick town, and it did have an American Indian reservation on it. So people either asked me what I was or assumed I was Miwok Indian, which was fine too. My mom did make me go to Indian Club because she figured, well, you know, Mexicans, we're Indians too, so you should just go to Indian Club. And I was like, I don't really think Indian Club and Tuolumne really means Mexicans. And she goes, well, I don't think they're going to say you can't go. So you're going to go to Indian Club. So I went to Indian Club. But Indian Club was one of the few cultural experiences that I had in the small town where I grew up. When I left high school when I was 17, or I graduated high school when I was 17 because my birthday falls in October, and I moved to San Francisco. San Francisco is only about 2.5 hours from where I grew up. And I left for San Francisco like 2 weeks after graduation. Bam, I was out of there. And I was already in a band, my first band, Bitch Fight. And we wanted to go to community college and play music in the Bay Area. So that's what we did. So Bitch Fight was the first band, and then we broke up after about 1.5 years. And then I did a very short stint in a band called Come On the Carnivores. And then I formed Spitboy. And Spitboy was the band that was together the longest that I probably am most known for. I'm going to read, actually first I'll take some questions, and I'm going to read My Body Is Mine, this piece about Spitboy. Questions? Anyone have any questions? I don't like to detain audiences, you know, you're just like, I have to just listen, and that's so boring, sometimes you want to interact. Yes?
So, other than, I guess, you listen to music on your own in a small town, where else were there music things in that?
There wasn't any music, which is why we had to start our own band when we were 15. Like, there were no punk bands, there was no punk clubs, there wasn't even, I mean, there was a youth center in town that was open sporadically based on whether or not the county had the budget for it, you know. So there really wasn't anything for young people to do, so we did a lot of drinking alcohol, from a young age, because that's what you do in a small town or when you're a bored teenager. I was in band, in the school band, all through elementary and high school, so that was actually something that kept me focused on school, because I wanted to do well enough in school to be in band. And I didn't dislike school totally. I mean, there were things about it that I didn't like. I was bullied from a young age by a lot of the teachers, in elementary school in particular. High school was a little better, but I just didn't like the authority aspect, and I just felt like I never really understood the point of high school. So playing music, at least high schools have music, and I guess that's the point of having sports and music programs. Of course, nowadays a lot of schools don't have music programs, they only have sports programs. But that's really, I think, the point of originally the idea of having arts programs in high schools, because not everyone is a good sheep. Not everyone is right or has the mind that can more easily accept traditional education. So for me, music was a really important way to kind of focus me and my energy and provide an outlet. Any other questions? Yeah.
So your band Spitboy, was it created during like the Riot Grrrl movement, or were you like alongside that?
That's the next piece.
Oh,
You're the perfect plant. You're the perfect audience plant. I was actually thinking to myself when I was writing up the order, it's like, I'm going to take some questions, and then I bet someone will ask about Riot Grrrl, and I'll be able to address that. So I wrote this book when I realized that I had an audience and that people, I didn't really know and understand what a breakthrough band Spitboy was. Because Spitboy broke up, I went back to college, later in life, full-time college, and I had my son when I was in graduate school, and that was all planned. And I didn't want to be one of those boring adults who was like, you know, back when I was in a punk band. You know, those boring adults who talk about their glory days. So for years and years, I didn't talk about being in a band. I didn't play drums. I just went to school and put my head down and got my degree. I got my graduate degree because I wanted to teach community college. I had a lot of community college instructors, unlike high school and elementary school, who really mentored me and helped me develop my interests and my talents, my natural talents, instead of kind of like foisting their idea of what they wanted me to be. So I wanted to teach community college, so it was important for me to get through school. But when I started, after I got out of my denial that I was in a punk band, and I wasn't trying to deny that, I just wasn't trying to be like some boring adult, like trying to relive her glory days, because that's really sad when adults do that. So I started writing these pieces, and as I was writing them, I realized that Spitboy was not a Riot Grrrl band, and that was on purpose. And I started to realize that everything around women in punk rock from the 90s was all premised on being a part of the Riot Grrrl movement. And I realized that Spitboy's legacy was going to get lost. And in a sense, my own legacy, not that we all have to have a legacy, because that seems sort of pig-headed, right? But my own legacy would be lost if I didn't capture it, if I didn't write about it. I was the only person of color in Spitboy, so it was important for me to also write about the punk scene from the perspective of a person of color, because that hasn't been done that well. And that is actually some of the tension with the Riot Grrrl history as well, that it did seem to visibilize young women of color and not always feel welcoming. All Riot Grrrl scenes were different in different areas, so you can't say that across the board. But Spitboy didn't want to be a Riot Grrrl band, and we avoided saying that we weren't a Riot Grrrl band, because we started before we heard, about 9 months before we heard anything about Spitboy, about Riot Grrrl. And there was no internet. You don't hear about things going on in other scenes until you read the scene report, Maximum Rock and Roll, which only comes out once a month, right? So when we started touring, people started asking us if we were a Riot Grrrl band, and we had to figure out what that was. And then once we figured it out, we were like, oh, what are we going to say? And we would just sort of avoid the question, like, oh, we think what they're doing is really cool. We finally had to say live that we weren't, and I did it pretty uneloquently. I'm the one who said it live at a show in Bikini Kill. Members of Bikini Kill were in the audience. I was in Washington, D.C., where they were all living at the time. We're not a Riot Grrrl band. I just blurted it out. And we didn't make any friends that day, I'll tell you that much. We decided, we had several band meetings and discussions and being on tour. We finally said, we're just going to have to start saying in interviews, because every time we got interviewed, we'd ask if we were a Riot Grrrl band. And we finally said, no, we're going to have to say something. And we didn't know when or who was going to say it. We just knew that we had to say something. And we figured when it comes up next, we'll address it. And there were main reasons. The main reason why we didn't want to be a Riot Grrrl band is because in the Bay Area in the 1990s, women feminists did not want to be called girls. We wanted to be called women. And we felt like we had earned the title of women. We weren't little girls. We didn't want to be put down. We felt like that was a hierarchical term. Men get to be men, women have to be girls. That just seemed unfair. And we also were very uncomfortable with, we weren't a pop punk band also. We weren't like a separate. And we tried to figure out a way to do that in a way that wasn't alienating, and so that we didn't want to talk down on a movement that was so important, but at the same time, but I should just say we didn't do a very good job of being alienating. In the end, we got some enemies. So there is a piece in the book called "I'm Not a Riot Grrrl Band." I have a few here. You can also get them upstairs if you're interested, or at your local library. But this piece is called "My Body Is Mine." And it's about Riot Grrrl. It addresses that whole issue. And I teach community college English, so I did wind up getting a degree and go to teaching community college, which I love to do. And I didn't want to stand back there, because that would make me feel like I was at work if I stood back there. Even though I don't teach science, that would make me feel like I was at work. So I thought, I'll just sit on the table. So this is called "My Body Is Mine." When we released our Mi Cuerpo Es Mío 7-inch, a Riot Grrrl from Olympia accused Spitboy of cultural appropriation. The Riot Grrrl had ties to the Bay Area, and she was white. Maybe she really believed the accusation. Maybe cultural appropriation was a new concept to her, one that she learned at Evergreen College and felt it applied to us. Or maybe she was just pissed off at Spitboy because we distanced ourselves from her movement. She objected to our use of Spanish for the title of the record and accused us of stealing from someone else's culture, in particular the words "Mi cuerpo es mío," which translates to "my body is mine." Apparently, my body was invisible. Mi Cuerpo Es Mío, Spitboy's third release, followed our self-titled 7-inch on Lookout Records and our full-length LP that came out on Ebullition. Mi Cuerpo Es Mío was an Allied release. We chose Allied because of our ties mostly through Karen, who was the guitar player, with John Yates, who ran Allied, and because we decided that we would not be owned by any one particular record label, especially since, like the punk scene itself, the punk record labels were run by men. We were, of course, grateful for these particular men, but we didn't want any of them to feel any kind of ownership over us, our music, or our message. I remember Karen framing our approach that way, and it made sense to me after experiencing a great deal of embarrassment from comments made during the release of the Kamala and the Carnivore 7-inch Girl Band, which came out in 1999 when I was still dating founding member of Lookout Records, David Hayes. Back then, a few people actually said that Kamal and the Carnivores only got to make a record on Lookout because I was dating David. But it turns out that Girl Band was just a really good record after all. And it had a brilliant cover concept inspired by Superstar, the Karen Carpenter movie, a movie that Ivy and I had seen and loved. On the cover of Girl Band, each member of Kamal and the Carnivores is depicted with Barbie dolls, or as had been done in the movie. Has anyone? It's a really weird, like, cult movie. It's called Karen Carpenter story, Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, and it's really creepily, like, done. This weird stop motion with Barbie dolls. And it looks really like kind of low budget, and it's really weird and creepy, but it's really compelling. They have like little tiny boxes of X-Lax, like the whole nine. We even found a brown skin Barbie for my doll and an Asian Barbie for Linda, who played guitar. During my days entrenched in the scene, I never tried to pass for white, but my nickname was Todd, and people didn't always go by their last names. Familial ties were less important than what band you were in, zine you wrote, or city you were from, and a lot of us were from divorced or dysfunctional families anyway. If you were in a band, you went by your first name, and your last name was the name of your band. Todd Spitboy, Adrian Spitboy, and so on. Before Spitboy, people called me Todd Bitchfight. Although I looked quite different from the rest of Spitboy, my ethnicity didn't often come up in conversation, not in the Bay Area. In the 1990s, people were still trying to be colorblind, to not see race, or to pretend not to see it, as the case may be. It wasn't polite to talk about race, and so I didn't really talk about it, but one conversation sticks out in my mind. What's your last name? We had just played a show, and a friend of Karen's had come to see us play. Gonzales, I said. It was an unusual question. Your last name is Gonzales? Are you Mexican? Yeah, I am, I said. That was sort of nice. Most people usually said, what are you? How come I didn't know that before? I don't know, I said. That's so weird. I'm sorry, said Karen's friend, who was blonde and pretty normal looking, the kind of girl one might assume was sheltered by privilege. What do you mean? It seems like I should have known that before. I've seen you play, and Spitboy, you know, you're a punk band. I never thought about you all being anything other than that. Oh yeah, I said. I feel bad. She reached out and touched my knee. I didn't know what to say. Identity is so important. I didn't even see you. I just saw Spitboy. I don't think that's uncommon, I said. It's easier just to see the short hair and clothes, I guess. Well, I'm not going to do that again, she said. It's not right. I couldn't believe this whole conversation. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. This is amazing. This woman is so sensitive and like thoughtful, and like she's saying it all out loud. It was really cool. After so many years of race-class ridicule that I endured growing up in Tuolumne, fitting in was important to me, but fitting into the punk scene the way I did created a whole other problem. In conforming to the non-conformist punk ways, adhering mostly to the punk uniform, I had lost something along the way. I began experiencing rumblings of discontent that I didn't quite understand. I secretly listened to Linda Ronstadt's Canciones de mi Padre and sang along, holding long, sad notes to words that, like Linda Ronstadt, I only vaguely understood. I knew that my identity was the root of my confusion and discontent, so I began taking Spanish classes at a local community college when I could fit them in after work. Learning to speak Spanish had been a lifelong dream. As a child, someone had given me a red hardcover Spanish-English dictionary, and I naively thought that if I read it every night before bed, that I would become bilingual like the rest of my family in East LA. Oh, I'm just like choking on my spit. That's not my water either. That's all right. Later, living in the Bay Area and not being able to speak Spanish began messing with my head. It made me feel inadequate, like a phony. I sometimes avoided going to the Mission District in San Francisco because while I was super hard While I was working super hard to fit into the punk scene, playing in bands, going to shows, and volunteering at Blacklist, and not always feeling totally accepted or understood, I felt really out of place in the mission where it seemed like everyone spoke to me in Spanish and looked baffled when I couldn't respond. Oh, thank you. Learning to speak my family's language, even the little that I was able to speak after only a couple of semesters of college Spanish, provided some relief and helped me come out as a person of color in the scene. Let me just take a look at this. My throat just got really dry. Much better, thank you. Sometimes you just can't come back from that without water. I didn't say all this out loud when I suggested Mi Cuerpo es Mío as the title, because I still didn't really have the words to express all that was going on inside me at 25. Later, when I did have the words, they often came out wrong, clumsy, angry, abrasive, and alienating, especially in those last days of Instant Grrrl, that was the band after Spitboy. But I suppose this was part of my process. Everyone in the band liked the phrase Mi Cuerpo es Mío because of its strength and sound and content, because it summed up all that we were about. Still, the main reason that I suggested Mi Cuerpo es Mío as the title of the 7-inch was to acknowledge an aspect of my membership in the band that I felt was missing. An aspect of myself that I felt unable or insecure about expressing. Blame the scene, blame Tuolumne, blame America. It could have been any number of those things. Probably all of them together were to blame for my locura, my schizophrenic or closeted identity. I hadn't been at all sure that the Spit Women would want to name our record My Body Is Mine in Spanish, but they did, and that felt good. But being criticized by a Riot girl was a huge blow. It really pissed me off. Like a lot of people, my first reaction to anything upsetting back then was anger. Anger is a good mask for sadness. So I didn't understand right away that I wasn't really mad at some Riot girl keen on accusing people of a cultural appropriation, but who couldn't recognize a person of color when she was staring one in the face, had attacked the band. I was hurt because people didn't really see me, and that I had let it happen. People in the scene did not see me, who I really was at the core, the face and the body through which I experienced the world. At shows, I did not register as a Xicana. I was just the drummer of Spitboy, and for some reason, I couldn't be both. So that's there are two main pieces in the book that address Spitboy's relationship with Riot Grrrl. So now I'm going to open up to questions. Anyone have any other questions? You don't have to ask questions. Yeah.
You said there wasn't much of a music community where you were from originally.
Uh-huh.
So how did you expand upon eventually start playing shows?
Well, we didn't play shows. We played parties. So teenagers like to drink beer and have parties. You may remember that. And you know, when you grow up in a small town, there are like barns or like house parties. Anywhere there's house parties, but in small towns, sometimes you can play like on someone's deck. Like I remember we used to play on my mom's deck, or in our neighbor's old house, or someone's backyard, his brick patio on it, or barns or whatever. So we would just play parties, and the punk boys. There's a piece about that in the band in the book. There were only about, in any given time, about 12 punk kids or so, maybe 15, probably no more than that. There were maybe 12 punk kids, and there were other people who were like not totally into punk rock, or maybe more new wave, or just like geeks, total nerds. And we all, at my high school, all the nerds and punks and geeks had to hang out together, or else the rednecks would like beat our asses or throw food at us and stuff. So we all became friends and kind of like protected each other. So, but the punk boys in our school, only in the 90s, they only wanted to date the trendy girls. And when my friends and I tried to start a band, they said, girls can't play music. And we were like, I have been playing music since I was in the 3rd grade. So I was like, what are you talking about? We can't play music. I've been playing music already my whole life almost. You can't tell me I can't play music. Well, they were trying to start their own band. And they were just mad because they hadn't started their band. and we had started our band, and we were already writing our own songs. I'll just tell you this, they never started a band. Yeah, exactly. That's what happens when you talk shit like that. You just talk a lot of shit, and you talk, you don't do anything about it, right? So the boys in our scene were not supportive of us at all, unfortunately, the young men. But there was this group of guys that we hung out with, and there were these metal guys and this metal band. And they thought we were so cool. And our singer happened to know the guitar player from childhood. Their moms would smoke pot together. All of our moms smoked pot together. So they were all hippie moms, so they all hung out and got a little high. And so Susie was friends with Tom, and Tom started this metal band, and they thought we were so cool, so they were like, you should come and play this party with us. You guys can open for us, essentially. So they would, every time they had a party, if there was, if the neighborhood could endure two bands, if they sensed that the neighborhood could endure two bands rocking late into the night, they would invite us to come and play. So we would go all over the county following these guys around and play a few of our songs before they played their metal set. And they really encouraged us, and we were just learning our instruments and learning how to play, but they were always like, yeah, that was awesome. They just made us feel really good. And so, we have this weird stereotypes about metal and punk being enemies, and it is not always, in a small town, sometimes you become friends with the people who are just kind of the misfits, right? It doesn't matter if you're listening to metal or punk rock or not, you just kind of have to all group together, because that's what you have, that's your community, right? Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, so you grew up punk, you talked about having kids. Are your kids into subculture, or did they rebel by being preppy and...
So I only have one child, and he's right here. And I wouldn't say he's rebelled, but when he was little, he did sing Smiths in the car, hang the DJ, hang the DJ, hang the DJ, which I loved. And I was like, oh man, he's gonna get in trouble in school. I'm gonna have to explain to the teacher why he keeps saying hang the DJ. But my son is a jazz piano player, and he goes to performing arts school. So my grandfather was a Latin jazz pianist and a percussionist. And my son, I played drums and was kind of musical, I think just through my grandfather's line, right? And my son has almost literally followed in the footsteps, and going further than my grandfather ever did, and he's only 14 years old. So I wouldn't say he's rebelling, but he does think that his style of music is superior than mine, and that's okay, it probably is. Yeah?
I'm interested about your relationship with Spanish and why you were saying, the Mexican in East LA has Spanish and why you kind of attain it.
Well, yeah, my mom grew up during the Americanization period in Boyle Heights, and her brother speaks Spanish. He grew up speaking Spanish the best because he was the oldest. Her sister understands some Spanish but doesn't speak it. My mom doesn't speak any and hardly understands any Spanish because when my aunt and uncle were going to school, they were still spanking kids, and kids were getting in trouble for speaking Spanish in school, in the East LA schools, which is why one of the main reasons for the Xicana movement and the school walkouts. And so my grandparents made a decision to stop speaking Spanish in the home, because they knew my mom was already, being malcriada already, and they knew that she was going to get, with her mouth, in a lot of trouble if she wasn't speaking English already. So my mom famously burned down their family's house at the age of 5 by playing with matches. That was the first, the first thing that one of the early things that she did when they realized, ooh, we gotta watch out for Cheryl. So my mom didn't learn Spanish, then we moved to a small town, and so there was no way that my own father, my birth father, who was, abusive, so we left him, but he was bilingual. But we didn't stay in LA. So if we had stayed in LA, it would have been easier. She probably wouldn't have lost as much as she did, and I probably would have grown up speaking it more naturally. So I had to take it in a community college. And then my husband is from Mexico, and he's bilingual, so that helps too. Yeah, it's been really important for me to learn. But I've said this recently, and I really mean it, and that is that I've sort of accepted that my Spanish probably will not ever get as better than it is. And I'm kind of okay with that. Like, I won't stop trying to improve, because that's silly. Like, I don't want to be totally defeatist, but I mean, I like to learn new stuff. But I've sort of accepted that maybe it won't get any better than it is, and you know, that's a really a huge part of my identity. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, and like, it sucks that that Americanization period came and disrupted our families' language, our mother tongue. On the other hand, you know, the Chicano experience is really, really different than being Mexican. So, and this is one of the many ways. Yeah, I'll just own it. Yeah, it's cool. Anything else?
Yeah, after you guys got called out for like using a title in Spanish, did that kind of inspire you to want to address it and want to kind of like show her that she was wrong?
It did. I wrote a public letter in a fanzine addressing her by name, and pointed out that I indeed was a Latina, and that there shouldn't be any, like, but basically I just pointed out that she seemed to have missed that important fact. I didn't say this, but this is what I was thinking when I wrote the public letter, was that it was I did say this sort of in the piece, it was a huge blow because I was working really hard to learn Spanish, and feeling really like comforted by the fact that I could learn it. After, you know, wishing I had knew it for so many years, I'm feeling so inadequate. And then she just, you know, so I bring it into the band experience, right? And I'm learning Spanish enough to explain it to the band, what it means and the title and all that. And it was just sort of taken from me in this way, you know. The power of it was sort of taken from me because she didn't see me. And then it made me feel like a phony again, actually. It made me question, like, maybe I shouldn't have used the title because I don't really speak Spanish. But then I was like, well, that doesn't make me any, not being able to speak Spanish in America as a Latina doesn't make you any less Latina. In fact, that is large part what is the Latina experience in America for many of us. So I had to like really spend a lot of time thinking about it and processing it. But I spent a lot of time really angry about it. Which, you know, anger really is sadness, you know. And I think the anger can be power, but, you know, anger can also be very destructive to yourself in that. So it was nice to be able to like just kind of move on, recognize it for what it is. I was really sad. It really made me sad. Yeah. One more question? Can we wrap it up? All right. No one has any questions. If you're interested in a book, you can get it here, or you can get it upstairs in the book fair. I guess the book fair is going until 6 o'clock. And yeah, it'd be great to meet you if you're interested. And the book is $15. And you may have spent all your money because you've been here all day, right? We have a limited amount of money and we've been buying books all day long. I totally get it. You can go to the library, you can read it there. You can buy it online and all that good stuff, you know. All those capitalist things that we must do in America. All right, thank you so much.
This is a real story.